This week we're doing something slightly different. Normally at Clerkenwell Talks we take the opportunity to think about how the Christian faith and work interact and combine. So this week we're thinking about the question, my work, my identity. How does work and identity interact? What do the two have to do with each other? In 2016, NatWest ran an advertising campaign called We Are What We Do. We Are What We Do. And in their advert, they wanted to highlight that at the end of the day, and I quote from the advert, we are all what we have done and what we will do. We are all what we have done and what we will do. We are what we do. And for lots of us here, and especially if we find ourselves working in central London, that can seem pretty real to us, I'm sure. What we do is important to us. Often when we meet someone for the first time, after asking the first question of what is their name, we then move on to, well, what do you do? And we wait for them to reciprocate with the same questions back. And hopefully, if you enjoy your work, you take pleasure in telling them about what it is you do. Maybe even telling them about some recent achievements or what you've done well recently. Our identity, who we are, is so often determined by what it is we do. And maybe that isn't much of a surprise, because we spend so much of our time getting to the point of where we are now. Our education as a child leads to our A-levels, leads to the choice of university, the choice of degree, so that we can get to what we do, is what we spend so much of our time doing in the build-up to now. And even now, when it comes to work itself, we spend a lot of time there. Did you know that on average, you will spend over 90,000 hours at work over the course of your lifetime? And not just there, but unfortunately getting there, you'll spend on average around 18 months of your life commuting, probably more if you're working in central London commuting from the edge of London. And so if we're going to spend that much time getting there and that much time actually there itself working, it's no surprise then that what we do is really important to us. What we do is such a big part of us. It shapes our identity. It's who we are. And interestingly, it's not always been like that. Whilst we often think that what we do or who we are is determined by what we do, in more traditional cultures it would have been the opposite way round. And so what we do is totally determined by who we are. Who we are is the most important thing. Our identity is founded on our family, or our name, or our background. And that in turn then leads to what we do. We follow the family line of my father was a X, my grandfather was an X, so I am an X. And so in traditional cultures, this would bring a massive security. You knew what you were going to do, you knew what it was going to be like. Yet, to us today, looking back and hearing that, we probably think it's pretty restrictive. I mean, at the end of the day, if you didn't want to do what everyone else has done, do you get a choice about it? And so then today, we're so much more free, aren't we? We're free to decide whatever we want to do. And so we choose our profession, and even then we can just skip from job to job, and even from career to career if we want to. So much time and effort into what we do, as it means more and more to us. And so, as NatWest tell us, we are what we do. Our worth, our identity is so much more found in what we do rather than who we are. However, there can be a danger that even though we find so much freedom in being able to form our identity based on what we do, well, maybe we have lost the security that previous generations in traditional culture in the past once enjoyed. And what's the big problem with that? Well, if what I do shapes who I am, if who I am is determined by what I do, if my identity is solely based on my achievements, on my performance, well, the massive danger is that it is a really insecure thing to build my identity on. Why? Why does it work out like that? How does that work out? Well, let me paint some hypothetical pictures, if you like, that maybe as I go through them, maybe you could relate to one or two of them, either previously or maybe even now. Here's hypothetical picture number one. If what I do determines who I am, well, when I get there, wherever there is for you, wherever there is that you want to get there, that you think that will be my identity, that's what I really want to be doing. Well, when I get there, I've got to stay there because I don't want to drop off from there if that is what my identity is based on. And so I spend all my effort and energy just maintaining where I am because I'm doing what I want to do to shape who I am. In the film Chariots of Fire, which is based around the 1924 Olympic Games, one of the characters, Harold Abrams, is preparing for the 100-metre final. He's worked his whole life for this, and this is what he says in the build-up to it. And now, in 1 hour's time, I will be out there again. I will raise my eyes and look down that corridor, 4 feet wide, with 10 lonely seconds to justify my existence. But will I? For Harold Abrams, his running became his identity. And so every race formed his identity. And so he needed to maintain it in order to keep his identity. Or take a more modern example, Elon Musk, founder of the Tesla Group, in a recent interview said that he hardly ever sleeps. He works 120 hours per week, and he's not taken more than a week off since 2001. He said on his last birthday, he spent the full 24 hours at work. I've got to maintain what I do because what I do is who I am. I'll spend all my effort just staying there. As a barrister once said, I'm only as good as my last case. I'm only as good as my last achievement if it's my achievement, what I do, that forms who I am. Or alternatively, hypothetical picture number two, if what I do determines who I am, well, when I get there, I might feel great. I might be thrilled at getting there. But then the question is, how long does that feeling last? What if it slowly just starts to fade away? And so being there doesn't really cut it anymore. What do? Well, we need more. We crave the next step. And so if in hypothetical picture number one, we spend all our energy and effort in maintaining, well, here we spend all our effort in improving. And so we strive for more. We strive for next. The next achievement that's slightly better than the last achievement. The next promotion that will take me further than the last job. We always needing more to satisfy that identity that we're after. John Rockefeller was at one point the world's richest man, and he was the first US billionaire. And a reporter asked him once, how much money is enough? And he simply responded, just a little bit more. I just need a little bit more every single time to keep that identity that forms who I am. Or look at it a slightly different way, aside from achievement. If what I do determines who I am, we need to ask the question, can it deal with failure? Can it deal with failure? Because what if you get there, and when you get there, there isn't as good as you thought it would be, isn't what you quite expected. And so you've pinned your hopes on getting there, you've spent all your energy as a teenager dreaming of that position, and your decisions have shaped getting there, your GCSE decisions, your A-level results, the choice of university, the choice of degree. You go through all the training and hours because this will be it. And then when you get there, well, this isn't quite it. And so what do you do if what you do forms who you are, yet what you do isn't quite it? Does that mean who you are isn't quite it either? Or next hypothetical picture, if what you do determines who you are, what happens if you lose it? What happens if you're made redundant and you lose your job? Or actually you do well, you keep hold of your job, but eventually, well, eventually retirement does come. And so with retirement means end of work, and end of work means you end your job. And then what? Well, you don't just lose your job, you end up losing your identity. You end up losing part of your very self. Listen to how Johnny Wilkinson, former England rugby international, put it when he retired and realised it's rugby, but very relatable, I'm sure, to the world of work as we find it in London. Retirement is about losing your identity. In a rugby sense, when you're not out there giving it everything, you become the opposite, the antithesis of what you first were. You were the big, full, proud, look at me macho guy. Now you're the empty shell. You're worth nothing. When that identity crisis kicks in, you feel a little bit less of a man, less value. If what you do determines who you are, well, what happens when you lose it? Or final hypothetical picture. If what you do determines who you are, well, what happens if you never get there? If all the energy has been put in getting there, and yet it never actually quite happens? And so you look, and the job that you're in right now, well, it's all right, but it wasn't the plan. You hadn't really wished to be here. You wanted to be there. And so if what you do determines who you are, and what you do isn't quite what you hope for, well, then is who you are not quite what you hope for either? Do you see the danger if we let what we do determine who we are? We might have an amazing freedom, an identity that is so freeing, but the flip side is it's an identity that is so insecure, it's unstable. And so we're left asking the question, is there a better alternative? Can there be an identity that is both freeing and secure? An identity that's not based on achievement, on my last great achievement. An identity that can cope with failure even. Is that even possible? Imagine an identity where we are accepted, not based on any kind of performance or achievement. Imagine a security where no matter what happens with work, we achieve, we don't achieve, we get promotion, we get made redundant. We are accepted. We are known, we are loved even. It just sounds too good to be true, right? Is it? Well, no. The Christian faith offers something so much more. You see, the Christian faith is based upon the belief that the God who created the whole world around us, created every single one of us, and created each one of us in his image. He gives us an identity right from the start. And yet our response is, well, sack you, God, I don't want that identity. I don't want the identity that you give me. I reject your identity and I go and make my own identity. I reject everything about you and how you shape that identity, and I look to other things to form that identity. I look to my work so often. And God says, well, if you want to reject the identity that I give you, if you want to go after another identity, there are consequences. There is a punishment. And yet, God doesn't leave us in that hopeless situation. No, he comes down and he does something about it. He offers a new identity. And it's a radical identity because it's an identity that's not achieved, it's received. It's an identity that is not achieved, it's received. Let me read a sentence from the Bible. It's from John's Gospel. John was an eyewitness around at the time of Jesus. He was one of Jesus' earliest and closest followers. Here's what he records at the beginning of his Gospel. To all who did receive Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. You see, Christianity gives a whole new identity. It's an identity that means that we are accepted by the one who really matters. You see, so often we build our identity on the things that are really worth something to us. the things that have worth in our eyes, the things that have worth in others' eyes. And so we want to be accepted by others by telling them all that we do so that we might have worth in their eyes. And yet it's those who really matter in our eyes who we're wanting to tell. Play it out. We strive to get into that profession. We strive to get into that position, not so we can keep it quiet, but so we can tell others. And we enjoy telling others. We enjoy it when we get the opportunity to share what we do or what we've achieved. But it's not just anyone. If a randomer comes up to you on the street as you're walking out of Farringdon Station and asks you what you do, we're sceptical. We don't want to talk to them. We ignore them. We're thinking, what do they want out of us? What do they want us to give them? However, if your family or a close friend or someone you look up to and respect asks you, well, then you're thrilled to tell them. You're excited to tell them. You want to tell them all about you and what you've been up to. John says we've been accepted by the God of the universe. The God who created the whole world that we see around us. The God who threw stars into space. That God calls you by name and accepts you. There is no one greater we could be accepted by. And it's not just accepted, but it's loved. Did you hear what we've been accepted to become? Children of God. God accepts us not just into anything, but God accepts us into his family. He looks at us, he accepts us, he loves us, he wraps his arms around us, and he calls us his children. How is this possible? What have we done to achieve this? Well, not only do we have an identity that means that we're accepted by the one who really matters, but we also have an identity that means we are accepted by nothing that we have done or achieved. Did you hear in the verse how we become children of God? To all who did receive Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. We just receive it. Like a little child receiving a present from their parents, not because of anything they've done, just simply because it's their birthday, we receive it. A Christian's identity is not achieved, it's received. And yet, in the world of work, that can really stump us because nothing comes for free, right? The whole way through, we've been wired up to understand that we've got to achieve anything in this life. And so we work through our schooling, working hard to achieve the right to move on to the next stage. And we work through our university, working hard to achieve the right degree. And so then we move on to our MAs and MSCs and PhDs and ACAs and LPCs, FEs, any other combination of letters. But we work hard because we need to achieve it, right? Nothing comes for free. And if we're honest, if we're ever offered something for free, then we're cynical or skeptical or probably just both. And here's where Christianity is radically different from any other religion of other faiths. Because other religions say the same thing. We have to do something to earn our favour from God. And yet Christianity says it's not about what you do, it's all about what has been done for you. And so what's been done for you? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have been given an identity by God. We're made in the image of God. And yet we've rejected that identity, looking to make our own identity. And so there are consequences. And yet God doesn't leave us to suffer the consequence of the punishment that we deserve. But instead he sends his son to take that punishment for us. His son Jesus, who lived the life that we couldn't live, and yet dies the death that we all deserved to die. Not because of anything that we have done or achieved, just simply because of his love for us. And so all that we need to do is receive. It is wonderfully secure. It doesn't depend on me being good enough or achieving something. It doesn't give me the worry of whether I've made it or the worry of jeopardizing it by being made redundant or losing my job. Jesus died for me so I can be accepted, not on the basis of what I've done. I'm just accepted, and that can never change. It's secure. And so because it is secure, it is wonderfully freeing. It frees me with my identity secure to be able to go and to do my work, to use the gifts and abilities God has given me in wherever He places me. Tim Keller is a church leader over in New York, has been in New York for the last 30 years, and will have been ministering to people who are grappling with this thing. Where does my identity lie? Is it in my workplace? Here's what he says about a Christian's identity. If you believe the gospel and all its remarkable claims about Jesus and what He has done for you and who you are in Him, then nothing that happens in this world can actually get at your identity. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to believe this. Consider what a sweeping difference it would make. What difference would it make to our work? Well, here's two implications then as I finish. First, it means that we can deal with failure. For the Christian, their work doesn't determine who they are. It doesn't shape the core of their identity. No. As we've seen, that's far too unstable, far too insecure. Their identity is based on being a child of God, and that can never change. And so when failure comes, whatever it might be, you don't meet the targets in the latest project, you don't get the promotion you've hoped for, you don't get the job for the interview that you went for. Well, it doesn't rock us. Of course it hurts, it's not nice, we're not pretending it doesn't. But because our work isn't the core of our identity, well, then we're able to deal with it. Our identity as a child of God has not been affected. It means that I can deal with failure. And second, it means that I can love my work. Does a Christian identity mean that work doesn't matter? No. For the Christian, it doesn't mean work has no value, but it has a new value. Work is still part of my identity, it's part of who I am, but I don't have that terrible burden of it being the ultimate source and value of who I am. It means it's not something that I need in order to feel good about myself or to find my identity, but it means that I can see my work and my skills as gifts from God so that I can serve and work with those around me. Does what I do determine who I am? Maybe it does for you. Maybe you just find it inevitable. But there is a better alternative. An identity that isn't based on performance or achievement. An identity that can cope with failure. An identity that is both freeing and secure. Isn't that an identity worth pursuing and looking into?